Normally a human being is breathing somewhere 12 to 15 times per minute. Breath is very directly connected to how the mental fluctuations happen. If your breath drops below 6, then what the inanimate things, how they're reverberating, the reverberations of every form and the sounds attached to it become very clear to you.
But one who is on the spiritual path, one who wants to perceive, the most important thing is Akash.
The yogic system, we look at the human mechanism like this. There are 5 dimensions to it, there are 5 layers to it. Usually it's referred to as sheaths. One is the physical body, which is referred to as the food body, because this is essentially a heap of food that we have gathered over a period of time. The next is known as the mental body, because we ascribe intelligence to every cell in the body. There is more memory and intelligence in each molecule of DNA than you can decipher through your brain. That much of intelligence and memory is sitting right here. The third layer is called as the energy body. There are 3 fundamental aspects to it, but it's the first 2 which normally are experienced by most people, the right and the left, which has 36,000 on the right and 36,000 on the left, pathways or channels, which are described as nadis, which meet in 114 different major points, and these points are seen as possibilities. So, mysticism identifies these 114, the geography, the energy geography of the body, and how you could exploit this to transcend the limitations of the human mechanism. Now, the 4th layer is called as Vijnanamaya Kosha. What the word Vijnana means is, it is coming from 2 different words, Vishesh, Gyan. Gyan means knowing or knowledge. Vishesh means an extraordinary way of knowing. So whatever you cannot perceive through 5 senses, if you perceive that, then that is called as Vishesh Gyan or extraordinary knowledge. So, we are talking about a transitory dimension which is transiting from physical to non-physical. So, the 5th dimension, this is in whatever in the New Age language in America, they're saying this is etheric body. It's not an appropriate description, it is a transitory state where physical is fading out into non-physical nature. The 5th dimension is referred to as Anandamaya Kosha, which literally translates as bliss body. This does not mean there's a bubble of bliss or something inside. It is purely non-physical in nature. Because it is non-physical, we do not know how to define or describe it. There is no definition to it, there is no description to it. We're only talking about it from our experience. Whenever we touch it, we feel blissed out. So like children, we're calling it bliss body, because we do not know what is the nature of what it is, and it is not physical in nature, so we cannot put it into definition of words or descriptions or whatever. Now to enter into this dimension is the whole process of mysticism, because this non-physical nature is further classified in terms of our experience, how profoundly you involve in it. They talk like this. You can be in a fine spray of shower from this non-physical and how you will be. Or you can be drenched with it and how you will be. Or you can soak yourself in it and how you will be. Like this it is described. In this context, it's a… here I have to surrender my logic a little bit because that's how far my logic will go. What this means is, these are referred to as different dimensions of stillness. How can stillness be of different dimensions? For example, in our experience, if normally a human being is breathing somewhere 12 to 15 times per minute, breath is very directly connected to how the mental fluctuations happen. I don't know if science has explored this, but in our experience it's very much there. Suppose naturally, not by effort, by doing the right kind of things with your system, naturally if your breath drops below 11, then you begin to understand various reverberations that are happening around you in terms of all the subsonic sounds in which the animals are communicating becomes very obvious to you. If your breath drops below 9, naturally, without controlling it, then what the plants are exuding, the plant life, what it is doing, becomes very obvious to you. If your breath drops below 6, then what the inanimate things, how they're reverberating, this is known as rithambara prajna. That means the reverberations of every form and the sounds attached to it become very clear to you. Or in other words, the nature of the universe can be grasped if you know the language of the inanimate. Every form, how it is made, what is its nature, what it is right now and what it will evolve into, or what it was yesterday and what it is evolved into, all this is becoming apparent to you. As the concerns of survival recede, human beings will naturally evolve into perceiving higher things. But the important thing is the level of static, because breath is a survival process. If you sit still, it goes down. The more still your body becomes, the less you breathe. If you bring your whole system to a certain level of stillness, not being in a hyperventilated state, then your perception goes on increasing. So as the stillness deepens, these are referred to as, traditionally there are various ways in which it is presented. It is usually called as it's called Rudra, Hara and Sadashiva. One is still, but he's vibrant, he's roaring. Another is still, but he's in activity still. Another is absolutely still. Now always that which is absolutely still is referred to be as the ultimate intelligence. Everything else, in its anxiety to be active, it is sacrificing its intelligence at a certain level to be in a state of action. But that which is absolutely still is considered the highest intelligence. It is only in Eastern mysticism, the source of creation is been always celebrated as the highest intelligence. This is the biggest mistake I think modern societies have made is, people were told, God is compassion, God is love, God is generosity. These things mean something to you only when you don't have them. If you're not loved, you will look up, God should love you. If you're not fed well, you want a generous God. If you are down in some way, you want a compassionate God. But if you don't make any assumptions, if you look at a blade of grass, if you look at a flower, if you just look at the structure of an atom, one thing is, the source of creation is the highest level of intelligence that you can ever recognize anywhere. If you look at the creation, it is smack with intelligence all over the place. If we had only told people God is intelligence, we would have had a more sensible world. That's what I'm thinking and that's what I'm trying to bring it into people's experience, that the source of creation is the intelligence. If you recognize that, you try to emulate that.
If one wants to explore the mystical nature of our existence, then enhancing the Akash is a very vital and necessary aspect. Once there is a certain amount of mastery over the 5 elements, one will find there is no such thing as what is inward and what is outward. The 5 elements that we recognize as the basic ingredients of life, this elemental magic, I'm calling it elemental magic because just with 5 things, not 5,000,000, just 5 things. With 5 things, too much has been done. With 5 things, what is presenting itself as cosmos, what is presenting itself as life, what is presenting itself as everything that we can see, hear, smell, taste and touch, is well beyond the permutations and combinations that we can think of. If something goes beyond the permutations and combinations, then it's no more mathematic, it is magic. So this elemental magic, to master this elemental magic is the most fundamental dimension of yoga. Essentially, when people want to be physically robust, then earth would be important. But for one who is on the spiritual path, one who wants to perceive, the most important thing is Akash. Why Akash becomes most important is, in the making of this human form, 72% of water, 12% of earth, 6% of air, 4% of fire is largely determined. The rest is Akash. When we said rest, we did not mean 6%, we said rest. Now, if you increase the proportion of Akash within the system, if you increase the proportion of Akash in the larger scape of who we are, then our ability to perceive is tremendously enhanced. If this proportion remains low, or Akash is at its minimal in one's making, then their ability to perceive will be very minimal. Even if they have a great intellect, this intellect will forage in mundane things. It can never rise to perceive something more than that. So in this context, one important aspect of spiritual progress, one important aspect of Vigyan or Vishesh Gyan, if one wants to perceive beyond 5 senses, if one wants to perceive that which is not physical in nature, if one wants to extend his antenna to larger dimensions of life, if one wants to explore the mystical nature of our existence, then enhancing the Akash is a very vital and necessary aspect. Akash is a boundless dimension. When the composition of Akash is enhanced, then boundlessness becomes the nature of one's being. If not boundlessness, at least a boundary that you cannot see and feel. This gives the individual person a great sense of freedom, a great sense of not being tied down to anything. This lack of bondage within oneself is an essential amount of space that one needs if they want to have some mastery over these five elements. This goes for human system also. To keep the system well, to keep the system in an efficient and effective mode, but not being identified with it, is a very important or the very important step one has to take if one has to have mastery over elements. Once there is a certain amount of mastery over the five elements, one will find there is no such thing as what is inward and what is outward, because elements don't respect your boundaries. To put it in the simplest form, as you sit here, you breathe. The air does not respect your boundary, it is constantly in and out. This is not just air, this is happening with everything. The food that you eat and whatever substance we relieve ourselves of and everything else is in constant transaction, or the elements do not respect the boundaries of your body. The boundaries of your body are only for your psychological comfort, but the five elements have no respect for that, and they anyway transact without your permission. So if you have some access to experiencing the nature of the elements, then you also lose the boundaries of your body. Or in other words, you have sacrificed your privacy, because there is no such thing as privacy, because you know everything is seeping in and everything is seeping out constantly. When one wants to gain mastery, one of the things that are commonly done is those of you sitting in America or anywhere else in the world right now, including India, don't try to do this. You will see the spiritual movements of the past, whether you take the yogis like the Nagas or the Gorakhnathis or the Jains, one of the things that they do at the basic level of sadhana is, first thing is to expose themselves to elements, because they want the transaction to happen freely. As today, walking around naked in the world is not a possibility, though in India it is still in practice. You will see thousands of them walking naked, not bothered about the social norms. That is not a possibility for all of you. So one simple thing that you can do is move to a looser level of clothing. Well, you may not look shapely, but there is no shape to you on the elemental scape. It is in constant transaction. To facilitate this, to be able to be conscious of this, one important thing is there is a little bit of space between your body and what you wear, that it is not tight-fitting clothes. This is one step that one can take to If you pay attention, you will see beyond this breath, a whole lot of transaction is happening constantly across the body. If one pays enough attention to this transaction, then one will also slowly understand the nature and the composition of the elements within us, then enhancing one dimension or increasing the akash in the system through appropriate practice becomes a possibility. And of course, once I say this, the first question is, Sadhguru, what is that practice? Practice doesn't come first. Attention comes first. By attention, if one knows that there is transaction, not by intellect, but by attention, if one knows that there is a transaction, then how to tweak the transaction in our favor is something we can do. First thing is to take charge of the most obvious transactions. The most obvious transactions are breath, food, consumption of water, and the temperature of the body, and the temperature outside. These are the most obvious transactions. Just pay a little more attention to these obvious transactions. It always amazes me how breath, which is such an obvious transaction, and it doesn't happen quietly, it moves the entire body, but most people never ever notice it. If you can't notice your breath, how to notice anything subtler than that, because breath is a noisy activity, it is happening. If you bring attention to these things, how you eat, how you drink, how you breathe, how you touch everything that you touch, you will see the experience of life will rise to a completely different level. These simple things most human beings are not doing. They're gulping down what they eat and drink, they breathe completely unconsciously, they touch anything and everything without knowing what they're touching or feeling it. Largely it's happening like this for most people. If you bring awareness to that, if you bring… let me not even use the word awareness because it means many things to many people, bring more attention to that. If you are far more attentive to these things, then without slowing down anything, this is important, because people think that when you're breathing, you should not be doing anything else, just you must be breathing. When you're eating, you must be eating, when you're drinking, you must be drinking. No, that is the beauty of being human, that we have a cerebral capability of conducting complex activity within us and still be able to pay attention. It is like you're driving and you can still have a conversation with somebody. So two levels of attention are happening, just like this. You could be doing whatever you're doing, but pay attention to the breath. Breath is one thing that is always happening, so you can pay attention to that. You can also pay attention to the food that you eat and water that you drink, let it not happen all the time. So the possibility of knowing dimensions of the beyond, the possibility of dipping into the mystical nature of the existence is very much rooted in the elemental composition of who we are. Bringing about a transformation in this can do fantastic things to you, but one must also understand that fantastic things can also turn your life upside down. That is the nature of fantastic things.